This is a spiritual seeker's question and answer as opposed to Vedanta series questions. There is one question that I have in text already. So the question goes like this: could you talk about the differences between a monastic life and life of a householder in this day and age? Are there any fundamentally? So the fact that there's a distinction between these two terms means, of course, there is fundamentally a difference. Let's review the term monasticism, because it means different things, I suppose. But the original meaning of monasticism comes from mono, single, one. So we assume that somebody who wants to live a kind of single, dedicated life that is principally orientated around contemplative spiritual practice may be considered somebody in the life of monasticism. But your question is, in this day and age. Now, in Christianity, for example, or Western Christianity, I should say, there are kind of two forms of monasticism. One is true monasticism, such as those who follow the Benedictine rule, who live in community. And how did this develop? It developed because there was the hermit life, and then a few others living in separate huts in the same area, and then deciding that they would all come together on certain occasions, let's say Sundays and holy days and so on. And that was the start of a kind of community. This is really the start of monasticism in Ireland. That's exactly how it is. If you go, for example, to the west of Ireland, you go to Skellig Island and so on, you'll see that monasticism is really a separate huts made from stone huts, beehive huts. And then it seems that they were kind of semi-communal living, no doubt. But even earlier than that, there would have been the anchorite, hermit life. Now, still you'll find hermits. In Christianity, the most famous, living in the deserts, would be Saint Anthony. So Saint Anthony of Egypt, I think it was. Anyway, there are the desert fathers who decided that they will make life as uncomfortable for themselves as possible. They will live a life of extreme asceticism. And then as time goes on, we find this being replaced by communities. We have the Benedictine movement then, which pretty much is the model for all other Benedictine systems, and the advantage of living in community. So that kind of monasticism is, of course, very different from householder life. Householder life is with mixed genders, is with a certain set of problems and responsibilities, naturally. And so in community life, it's different. In community life, ownership is not there, or even a sense of ownership is not there. The day is regulated between work and prayer in that style. Now then, of course, the other variety in Western monasticism would be the friars, that is the Dominicans, the Franciscans, who feel that they need to get out into the world and do something for the world as well, and lead a life of service. But still the fundamental responsibilities of household life are not there. So much for the Western monasticism. Eastern monasticism, Christian monasticism, is purely the community monastic life with maybe one or two examples of hermits. Now let's look at the Eastern variety. Swami Purnananda, in his address to the Parliament of Religion, says, "I'm addressing you on behalf of the most ancient order of monks in the world, the order of sannyasis. So that's a wonderful claim, because you see, even if our own tradition will go back to Shankaracharya, Shankaracharya is said to have lived in, let's say, the 7th or 8th century of this current era. But he had teachers and so on and so forth, and we look at all the Upanishads and we see, yes, there were people who lived in ashrams, that is a community life, but there were also wandering sannyasis. And so there are 4 ashrams in life, and so the householder life forms one of these sections, assuming that we live for 100 years. First 25 years of your life will be studentship. Maybe the first 12 or so years of your life is studentship at home, where your parents are the tutors. Then you go off to, let's say, a forest academy, where an ashram, where you look for a teacher, and the teacher will teach all the subjects that we would normally put in the academic realm anyway, under our modern day secondary school and also university. So by age of 25, you're finished. The great difference between that system and the modern education system is the emphasis was on character building. And so an essential part of the curriculum would be the study of the Vedas. Not only to learn about how to control life, how to control things, but the essential principle was based on dharma. That is, learning to be a good citizen at the least, preparing you for the second stage of your life. Second stage of your life would be grihastha, householder life, where you take on responsibility, and you can see why it works. Your aim will be artha, wealth creation. And the wealth creation naturally, because it's not just for you, for your family, but it's for the wider society. And it is based on dharma. So all of the other phases is based on this principle of moral teachings, higher values, spirit of generosity for the wider community, for society. Where is your place in society? And so that takes you up to the next stage. Let's say the age of 50, from 50 to 75. You then go into the forest, you become forest dweller. You do that with your wife or maybe alone, and you contribute toward the education system. And then you're dedicated to fulfilling all of those legitimate desires that are based on dharma, and that is your aim. And all of that really is one kind of aspect of the social movement. But you see, within that forest dwelling situation, there will be monasticism. But this is residential monasticism. And that's another kind of monasticism then that we're talking about when we talk of the order of sannyasis. Because the final will be the formal sannyasis from 75 years onwards, where you go as a monastic, that is mono, one, and there are rules. And your aim in life is moksha. Your aim is to look for freedom. All the others were leading up to this moment, no doubt. But now you're attacking it directly, having fulfilled all your responsibilities. So there is this kind of monasticism, and no doubt there were communities which were there where monks of the same understandings, let's say the same philosophical schools, would come together from time to time, but generally they would be in a wandering mode. We see this lifestyle when we study the monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, that on his passing they form a community monastery at Baranagar, but one by one they go off and lead a wandering life. Why wandering life? For 2 reasons. Firstly, to intensify your spiritual life through faith. That is, if I wander off, then I shouldn't have to worry where will my food come from and all the rest of it. There's a wonderful story that Ramakrishna tells It tells the story of the sadhu who lives in a cave above a village. And of course, the style, how you get your food is you typically go from house to house and you beg for your food. And every household will provide some food, understanding that you are in the last phase of your life. I should say, what happens if, when you are born, you have an urge for this phase from the very beginning? Well, you don't have to wait to go through this entire 75 years to get that, because we have the system of transmigration, where if you happen to die, let us say, the age of 76 or something, 77, then you are reborn, as it were, because we know fundamentally we're never born and we never die. So we pick up the urge, the soul picks up the urge to continue the pilgrim journey. And so wherever we left, we continue. Anyway, the story goes like this, that the sadhu went to beg food as normal and so on and so forth. And he was given a nice piece of cloth. And that one piece of cloth, minimalistic living, wonderful, he had to wash and he hung up to dry. Unfortunately, the rats got hold of it. So he had to go and beg another piece of cloth. 2 pieces of cloth were there, one to wear, one to dry or wash. And unfortunately, the rats were there. So the next thing he had to request from the villagers, or they urged him, look, we can't keep giving you cloths. We're obliged to give you some food, but cloths, not so sure about this. Why don't you get a cat? Here, we'll give you a cat. The cat will catch the rats. And that was very successful. All the cloths intact. Unfortunately, the next dilemma was, when begging the food, he had to beg for a little extra milk for the cat, or some food for the cat. And so that's another thing they had to supply. Then eventually they said, this is an extra burden on us. We're giving you all this milk. You should really get a cow. We'll give you a cow. And then that's the end of it. So a cow was supplied, and the cow gave the milk. And then how to look after the cow, because the cow had to feed. So he had to get hold of a plot of land, and the cow grazed there. And then, of course, how to maintain the cow and how to maintain the land. So a family was required. So the man got married and had children, and so it goes on. So the sadhu, all but for the want of a piece of cloth, became a householder. It was a wonderful story. Now you see, both these paths, the paths of the monastic and the householder, are both spiritual paths, but they have their distinctions, no doubt. Now you see, how is it that in the Eastern world, monasteries developed in the same way that they developed in Western Christianity and Oriental Christianity? Now we have to bring in Buddhism. And Buddhism had the residential monasteries. And so, but they were also missionaries, and they were also doing charitable work, no doubt. And of course, don't forget that the monasteries, I'll give you the example of Ireland, were enclosed areas which were part of a wider community. And the wider community lived outside the monastery premises, but they were still within the same broad compound. And it was the monasteries that were supporting the agriculture. And it was the community that was supporting the monasteries. This is how the system worked. Now, in Buddhism, you have something very similar, and the monasteries are there, and the monasteries are supported by benefactors, mainly royalty, kings, and so on. And we also find Shankaracharya bringing in these monasteries as well. He brings in 4 key monasteries in the 4 parts of the subcontinent of India. One in the north, one in the south, and the east and the west. Dwaraka, Puri, and so on. And so the tradition that the Ramakrishna tradition is from, the monastic tradition, will be from the southern tradition. And so, strictly speaking, the Puri should be added onto the end of the monastic name. So, we are certainly the oldest monastic movement in the world, going way, way, way back to pre-Buddhist times and even beyond to the times of the Vedas. And so that's that one type of monasticism. Now, the question related to in this day and age, Swami Vivekananda would have made a kind of revolution because he would have seen that there was a need for the monks to go and be active. In the older days, there was no need for it because you had a system whereby kings would look after society. That was their job. You had a system, varna, or what we might call caste, which is actually a Portuguese word, but never mind. But you certainly had the society necessarily operating in a certain way that was beneficial for society. Namely, society runs if you have dedicated people. People who don't want a salary, people who will support society, society will support them. These people are teachers, educators, and so on. This was a form of priests called Brahmins. It was very simple why it should work. In order for society to thrive, they require food. In order to get food, you need rainfall. In order to get rainfall, you need people who are dedicated to sacrifices that will produce it. Self-sacrificing, non-violent people. Then you had the administrative saints, because who should protect them? So you have to have something like a civil service, something like royalty, people who will defend, people who reform the military, and that's another section, Kshatriya. And then the vast majority of the population will be wealth earners, dedicated to the aim of artha, wealth creation. These are people engaged in agriculture, commerce, industry. And then you have to have some provision for unskilled labor. These are the Shudras. Of course, later we bring in the non-caste people, tribal people, and so on and so forth. But the ancient texts will identify these four things. And this is exactly what the Bhagavad Gita does in the 18th chapter, identifies four different sections of society. And when we analyze this, regardless of east, west, north, south, every nation will have to thrive using these four inputs. But there's something behind it. What is it? They're all working together in a cohesiveness, thinking that their skills and talents will fit in for the greater good, because it is all based on dharma. That is the difference. That is why there was no social disruptions. Swami Vivekananda had the idea, by the way, that countries themselves will take it in turns for all of these varnas, all of these sections to dominate. So in the socialist countries, the Shudra dominates. And in America, there's no doubt, it's the Vaishya that dominates commerce and industry. And of course, we know that in a country like, say, Iran, it is the Brahmins that dominate. The theocracy is going on. So it seems that society works in such a way that from time to time, one or the other of these dominates. And by the way, in the same family, you can have all these four contained in it. There's no hereditary caste system at that point in those days. So how does this relate to the householder? The householder fits into that particular category, which is the vast majority of the people. But that only applies to the householder stage of your life, before your next stage, which is becoming a forest dweller. Now, the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita uses two terms. And these two terms are sannyas and tyaga. So, of course, in modern times, the term sannyas raises in the mind of us all the picture of an ordained monk. And so Arjuna asked the Lord to decide which course is the more beneficial for him. Is it this sannyas or is it karma yoga? And neither Krishna nor Arjuna think, as we modern people do, of a monastic life as an alternative to a life of action, yoga of action. Why should there be no distinction in these modern times, particularly, is because it was the job of the kings, having explained the social structure, to look after the whole of society. If the king didn't do his job very well, then he would have been challenged. And we have many historical examples of how this happened. You're not doing a very good job. I challenge you. I'll take over your kingdom. The king says, not at all, over my dead body. The other person says, so be it. And they agree to meet on a battlefield. Like the game of chess, where there are certain rules of chivalry and no civilian gets involved, not like modern times, where civilians and vulnerable people are in the firing line, where it is a classical system of shooting missiles, as is going on in some places now, even as we talk, or whether it is a fairly recently form of action from the 1960s, say, which is the form of terrorism, targeting vulnerable people. You see, both of these are inclusive of civilians. This is the unfortunate thing in so-called modern warfare. So in these ancient times, in the Orient, it wasn't like that. It was designed so, let's have a contest. We even find this in the biblical times, and I mentioned it sometime before, where even the bloodshed of the military gets spared. You have a giant man on the one side who says, look, we'll have a contest. If you can defeat this warrior, then then the whole thing gets defeated. And of course, we know the story of David and Goliath. So, that's the first example of sort of alcoholism there, because it seems that David gave Goliath a small shot. It went to his head and he got stoned. It's a joke. Never mind about it. Anyway, you see, it's not this monastic life versus a yoga of action, karma yoga, in which the householder is primarily involved. And in these modern times, Swami Vivekananda saw there is nobody to uplift the poor. And if the monks, the sannyasis, monks and nuns, those leading a dedicated life, if they are to be in any way an example or of service to the community, then they should work for the welfare of all beings. This is mentioned in many places scripturally, that the enlightened person, the person who has attained this sense of freedom, moksha, is not somebody who withdraws from the world, but somebody who acts for the welfare of the world and does it spontaneously, naturally. And so, in these modern times, Swami Vivekananda declared the monks should be those people who are engaging in monastic life for their own spiritual welfare, but also for the welfare of the world. And the motto of the Ramakrishna order is like that: for my own salvation and the good of the whole world, the welfare of the whole world. So, what is the difference then between the sannyas and what is this term called tyaga, renunciation? And the Lord even affirms that the person who is a perpetual sannyasin or monk, or nun, we can say monastic, who neither hates nor desires, and who is free from the pairs of opposites. This is mentioned, he mentions this way, way back in the Bhagavad Gita. He mentions it in chapter 5 already. And so, what sannyasa means, therefore, in the context, is the path of knowledge which is called Sankhya in the Bhagavad Gita. It's really the path of jnana, knowledge. But later Arjuna wants to know, of course, what is the difference between the sannyasa and this tyaga? Tyaga also means renunciation. You can translate sannyasa also as renunciation. And so the Lord's reply is like this. It makes it very clear that monastic life is not directly meant by sannyasa. It is being stable in all circumstances. And indicates a certain path of knowledge. Whereas, you see, the wise declare sannyas to be the giving up of desire-impelled actions. Now, in householder life, there's a great tendency to be engaged in desire-impelled actions. And so this is the context of a householder, even though it is still a spiritual path. Why would we say that it's a spiritual path? Can we not give up desire-impelled actions in a householder life? Yes, you can. In fact, the social structure of it is very, very carefully crafted to increase your selflessness. And I often quote the example, supposing there's a bachelor who purchases a pint of milk every day for his own consumption. And then when he gets married, surely he doesn't turn around and say, well, I love you very much, but I'm a bachelor and I have been a bachelor all these years and I've been used to purchasing 1 pint of milk. Please go get your own milk. No, he'd rather buy 2 pints of milk for him and his spouse. And then when children come along, it's no longer 2 pints. It's milk for the whole family, and so it goes on. So really, family life is carefully crafted in human terms, not only human terms, but also there are other biological species that have this family unit that helps you to look after each other as a unit. Now, if you are now going to expand this beyond just the genetic interest and have love for everyone, that would be a tremendous thing. And so tyaga, on the other hand, is the abandonment of the fruits of all actions. So regardless whether it is living in a formal monastic life in these days or a householder life, it is necessary to give up the fruits of your actions, to give up the rewards. And that is a challenge for everyone. Even in monastic life, to give up the reward of satisfaction. Supposing somebody says, you see, there's this area of Vedanta society, and we'll measure its success on the basis of vast membership. I would say, forget about that. How many lives did you transform? That's the key. That's the measuring device. And even that you can't take any pride in, because it's not your energy. A careful analysis will show that you're not entitled to have an idea of a profiteer or an actor. Neither of these two. And egoism is attachment to these 2 roles. So the total giving up of the 2 kinds, namely desires on the one hand, and the fruits of your endeavors on the other, can be achieved. 9 of them can be achieved when the prophet-actor complex itself is not transcended. It is achieved when the prophet-actor complex itself is transcended. And we can do that in two ways. One is to replace the idea of the individual human ego by reverently installing the Lord of the universe in its place. And then you and I and the aspirants, spiritual seekers, must habitually see him working through all hands and feet, all eyes and all ears. This is mentioned in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, it's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, and he is also the knower. He's the knowledge, and he's the goal of the knowledge. That's three in one, abiding in the hearts of everyone. Naturally, working for the welfare of all beings will be a spontaneous response. And he has his supreme and transcendental aspect as well, of course. And he is accordingly, therefore, to be regarded as the undivided, the uninvolved witness. He just presides over the functions of this wonderful, indescribable power that we call nature. And then everything belongs there. That's the one way. The second way is to see the fundamental quintessential essence called the self or Atman in all beings and all beings in the self. And in the place of the self, you can put the personal God there. You can see that personal God similarly everywhere. And that step will also have the advantage of having the element of worship and adoration. And a still greater value is brought in when the Lord teaches that all daily activities must be offered to Him with due devotion. And this is a term, I don't know if I was the first to coin it or not, but I call this karma bhakti. It's a very sweet way. And for this purpose, that person must be viewed as the one from whom all beings originate. He, that is the Lord, and who pervades everything. So, that is the Creator and also the pervading Vishnu. And all such activities will surely benefit everyone. Either of these two ways. And in this sense, worship of God becomes service to His children. And so work is worship. And Swami Vivekananda understood this so clearly that he emphasized, no, you have to be of service to the community around you. There's a splendid harmony, therefore, of these two things. And in these two ways, we've not made any distinction between monastics and householders, because both can use either one of these methods. Now, of course, in community monastic life, there is this great advantage that life is regulated for you, and that there is a support of, let us say, a fraternity or sorority, depending whether you're a monk or a nun, that is a support system, that is a training system, where regardless of whether it is in the Buddhist monastic systems or whether it is in the Hindu systems, modern Hindu monastic systems, or whether it is in the Western monastic systems or the Eastern monastic systems. There is this internal support and structure whereby you have an abbot. And the rule of Benedict is a very, very comprehensive rule on how smoothly community life can work. And of course, we have this romantic idea that in monasteries, you can go and have your cell and your private meditation space and so on, and silence and quiet and all the rest of it. But you see, anybody who lives in community will still have the challenge, because you will still have to identify personality types, some of which you may get on with and some of which you may not. But to have a penetrating vision that goes deep down and sees, there is the Lord of the universe. or the mother of the universe, whatever gender you like to see it, sitting there. Same thing in family life. You have to have a penetrating vision. And the glorious example, when we've been studying the Ramayana on Saturdays, it took us quite a long time. Every Saturday we would study it. But the key to it and to acting as a formula for relationships will be that Sita sees Rama as the Lord of the universe, and Rama sees Sita as the mother of the whole world. This aspect of this energetic, dynamic aspect on the one side, feminine aspect on one side, and masculine side on the other, all working together in harmony so that you don't find any distinction. There's no such thing as Sita and Rama separately. It is Sita Ram. That's how it is. Both of these things. And then what of the children? Well, the children are just on loan to you. They're sitting in the lift waiting for a suitable environment, suitable XY chromosome to engage in, and to continue their pilgrim journey on this earth with a suitable set of educating parents, a suitable environment for their growth, and so on. In other words, their desires are fulfilled and continue to be fulfilled according to whatever they want. So these are some distinctions between these two aspects. And I hope that I answered your question. You see, there are some similar components that we can adopt. And that is that monastic life, of course, will have this organized, and I'm talking particularly of the Benedictine life and the Buddhist life and the modern Hindu monastic life, will be regulated by times. At such and such a time you get up, at such and such a time you eat, at such and such time you work, at such and such time you rest, at such and such time you study, at such and such a time you meditate, you pray. Like this, your whole day is regulated well. And I always remember, and you probably remember from a few weeks back, there was Swami Purnananda in America. People came to him to adopt a monastic life and were disappointed that they were put into a dormitory situation. And they said, no, we didn't ask for that. No, you didn't ask for that. But if you cannot get along with the other person, then you need to leave probably, or revalue things, We should learn to get on with people. So I think Swami Vivekananda gave a unique perspective to modern monastic life that combined all of the yogas, and that is telling in the emblem that he designed. Now, in household life, you can do the same thing, but you do require the extra discipline because the communal system just works for everybody, and you tie into that with some element of flexibility also. But generally speaking, it's a regulated life. Household life will be rewarding if it is also regulated as much as possible in a similar way. And so there are advantages of the household life, and there are advantages of the monastic life. There are disadvantages of the monastic life and disadvantages of the household life. And largely speaking, the household life suits most of the people, the majority of people. Is it not a wonderful spiritual activity, spiritual path, to introduce spirituality into your family? By example, to be the beacon example of a good and holy life, to invest all your energy in your reward of your children who are waiting in the lift and who are lent to you for you to look after and nurture and nourish until they themselves take on a life of their own. And in the context then of the elder person as a grandparent looking after the grandchildren and so on. All of that, you see, domestic environment, all can be a transformative spiritual life. And I hope I answered your question, by the way. You can
Swami,
send me.
can I ask a question? It's not very clearly thought out, but I've just noticed I had heard some news about my health, and I'm really trying to stay very much in the what's well. And but I've noticed sometimes at night time I get caught up in thoughts that leave me feeling anxious and depleted, and then I really find I'm giving myself a hard time about that. And it happens sometimes during the day. And I suppose it's just something about that process, and it's so important to link in with these talks. But I wondered what your thoughts were on that, or lack of thoughts.
Well, yes. And I would say it comes back to the first of all, it's natural. The level of anxiety is natural. But secondly, we have to also take measures for it not to overwhelm us. And we do that by adopting this regularity. So you have to ask yourself in the evening, just before I go to bed, am I involved in prayer, japa, etc.? In other words, you see, the bare minimum that is a spiritual instruction to most people might be, well, at least please meditate in the morning and the evening. That's a bare minimum because we should be doing japa continuously. And another way of putting it, and I repeat it, is for tuning in the attention into the glory of the divine, into the glory of the divine self, continuously tuning it and noticing when it goes away. And if we don't catch it quickly enough, we will find a downward spiral which will exacerbate the health issue. So we have to keep the upward spiral going. We have to elevate the mind, elevate the thought. As soon as we notice it either in stagnation or going on its downward journey, we have to catch it in time and spiral it upward. And what helps in that is a division in the day. So if we take, and we were talking about monastic system, and I'm going to talk about, for example, the Western monastic system, whereby they have matins, then they have louds, then they have a mid-morning, and then they have the mass, let us say, and then they have the mid-afternoon, and then they have the evening vespers, and then they have the compline before they go to bed. You take the Islamic system, and they're about to enter into Ramadan, praying 5 times a day, 5 times a day. The day is split up into 5 sections, just to keep people's minds attuned to the glory of the divine. So there are periods of time of the day when we might feel our loneliest. For example, in the late evening, we might feel this. And we have to notice these periods of time when we're likely to be at a low. We have to anticipate that and bring it up. And you see, this is the beauty about having some personal relationship with a living, moving originator or movement that is always with you, where we can at every moment feel its divine companionship. We have to practice this presence of the divine as a key, essential practice that all of us have to have. In other words, we're continuously filling up with divine thoughts. And that requires tremendous faith. It requires not just faith, it requires an intimate sense of closeness. There is always, it's useful, by the way, to get any books by Joel Goldsmith. I would encourage all of you to do that. And so I'm looking through some topics in a book called The Infinite Way, or really it's the practice of the infinite way. And I'm going to pick a topic here, God is omnipresent, that might help. Does the fish soar to find the ocean? He says. The eagle plunge, in fact, it's not him, it's a quotation from the Book of Acts. Does the fish soar to find the ocean? The eagle plunge to find the air. Oh, sorry, it's not a quotation biblical at all. It's from an author called Francis Thompson, from a book called The Kingdom of God. But the Book of Acts he's quoting from, for in him we live and move and have our being. Now, of course, we can put any other gender we like, but that is a key statement. In him we live and move and have our being. This is a kind of mantra. Now, I should point out, knowing the meaning of a mantra is one thing, but repeating it is another. Using it, accessing its potency is another. Anyway, it's an interesting chapter, and I'll just read a few sentences from it. One of the first things we have learned in the infinite way is, in quietness and in meditation, to give up the search for God in the realization that I and the Father are already one. Just as we are taught to give up the search for supply in the realization that all that the Father has is mine. This is a useful way of continuously tuning our attention in to the glory of the divine. And he says a recent letter from a student stated that a neighbor had asked for help and that her first thought had been, oh, if I could only know the presence of God. And immediately the voice said, stop seeking, God is already here. This is something he emphasizes in this language all the time, already here. So why can we not feel it? It's because we're blocking it with doubts and fears. The doubts and fears we don't have to tackle. All we have to do is tune our attention lovingly into the presence of the divine, and all the fears and doubts disappear by themselves. Just as when we face the sun and walk toward it, all the shadows, psychological language for difficulties, follows by itself. We don't have to attack or address them specifically or separately. So, always that must be our first realization whenever we meditate or seek communion with the divine, whenever we seek access to the divine. The very first thought we must entertain is that this divine already is where we are, whether it's in the evening, whether it's in the morning, whether it's at any time of the day, and even whenever a fear arises, we have to remind ourselves continuously. Now, the important thing in terms of health is this, that every thought movement will have its immediate effect on the body. And so if we feel that the body is, let's say, 2-3% defective, 97% everything is okay, then you see we're nourishing that defective part with negativity. What do we mean by negativity? Essentially, anxiety, fears, doubts, all these kinds of things. And these will naturally arise. It's not a question of pushing them down or repressing them. It's a question of rediverting our attention and feeling the presence, not just intellectually saying, oh, yes, 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 I heard the Swami and he said he's all present, and he was quoting from Joel Goldsmith, and Goldsmith was saying it's present and so on and so forth. No, none of this is very useful. What is useful is to feel that. What I say to people, when you meditate, when you sit, do not proceed any further until you feel the intimate, real, divine presence, full of joy and bliss, present where you sit, all around you. When you feel that, then you go on to the next step. So try to cultivate that all the time. And yes, you may need a number of different tools. Listening to these talks may be a tool, but japa is, of course, a very, very potent tool that you have as well. Prayer, japa, meditation. These are the vital things. And don't think, well, I did my meditation in the morning, I don't have to do anything. No. The whole art of meditation is continuously tuning the mind and noticing it when it goes off. And where it starts to go off, stop it and say, okay, I understand why that's there. It's there quite naturally. Let me now tune it in to something higher. And using positive words, strong, true, wise, full, free, truth, beauty, goodness, love, harmony, like that. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much, Swami. Thank you.
Okay. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you, Swami.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Om